Hi, I'm Marcus, for those that don't know me, and today's Palm Sunday. I want you to read Matthew chapter 21 from any version that you have. It's probably called Jesus' Triumphal Entrance into Jerusalem. I'll leave you to read it for yourselves, the account of what happened that day. When I read it, and I know this is odd and some of you may not understand it, some of you may not appreciate it, but when I read it, I was thinking of a boxing match. And in particular, I was thinking of what we call the ring walk. Now, if you've ever watched a boxing match, you'll know this is the moment the fighter enters the arena and he walks towards the boxing ring, ready to do battle. There's lots of razzmatazz, there are props, there are costumes, there's loud music, and the idea is to intimidate the opposition, to unnerve them, to put fear into them, as well as to entertain the crowd. Then you've got the bell of the first round, and this explosion of power as the champ comes out, tries to impose himself, and everyone wants that early knockout blow. People are screaming for victory. People want blood. And then what can happen is that can kind of fizzle out, and then it becomes a bit of a sparring contest. It can be frustrating, it's very tactical, it's not what we want to see, and the crowd can be very fickle if they don't get what they want. When I read Jesus entering into Jerusalem, I thought of Jesus' ring walk. He chose a donkey to ride on, not a horse, not a thoroughbred. He probably didn't look very warrior-like. He probably didn't look very masterful. He wasn't trying to intimidate, that's why. This was a man who was characterised by humility and gentleness. He wasn't a fighter. He had a name. It was, to the crowd, it was Son of David. That was what they were chanting as he rode in. If we actually read Matthew 21, we can see that there's a lot of people there and there's a big frenzy, a lot of excitement. It would be fair to say the place was rocking. In fact, if we read Matthew 21, it said that as he entered, people went wild with excitement. The entire city was thrown into an uproar. So the place was rocking. People were thinking back to warrior David when he came back from battle and gained victory. And they shouted out, "Son of David, bring us victory, save us." They wanted to see that Roman rule overthrown. They wanted oppression to be ended. In terms of Ding Ding Round 1, well, it actually started off pretty well, because when Jesus came into Jerusalem, he went into the temple and he overthrew the tables, and he challenged and he condemned the practices that were going on in God's temple. And for the crowd, this was just what they wanted to see. There was fire in his eyes. There was a glow about him. Many years ago, I watched a boxing match between America's Iron Mike Tyson and Great Britain's Frank Bruno. I say I watched it. I listened to it on the radio. I didn't have Sky in those days. And the commentator was the late Harry Carpenter. And Harry did something that went against the impartiality which he should have showed as a commentator, because Frank Bruno, out of nowhere, caught Iron Mike with a punch and rocked him on his feet. And Harry, the commentator, went, "Go on, Frank, get in there." And I guess when people saw Jesus overthrow the tables, they were like, "Go on, that's it, finish this, overwhelm them, overpower them, let's get rid of the Romans." But then it kind of fizzled out. It became a bit like this sparring contest. Jesus then began to teach. He began to tell parables about who would enter his kingdom, what his kingdom was like, how you qualified for the kingdom, and that it was for anyone, for good or bad. The leading priests, the scribes, the Pharisees, well, they were trying to back him into a corner. They were trying to trick him. They were trying to get evidence against him that they could give to the Crown Prosecution Service, as it were, and get him convicted. Jab after jab between both Jesus and the leading priests. And just when they thought they'd cornered him, he ducked and he dived. He didn't avoid the questions. He just answered them with such wisdom it left them stunned and bewildered. But as sometimes happens in a boxing match, the unthinkable happens, the never saw that coming moment, when the champ gets hit with a blow and he doesn't recover. Jesus was trialled. It was a mock trial. It was a false accusation. He was crucified, nailed to a cross. He was killed. And then he was buried, and an immovable stone was set in place. The devil raised his arms in the air and did a bit of a jig, claiming victory. The crowds, that same crowd, some of them had left by then. They'd given up all hope. They were maybe looking back to Palm Sunday and thinking, wow, we had such great expectations. They left early. Some stayed, but most left. The King of the Jews was out for the count. But just when it looked like it was all over, he got up. Believe it or not, Claire watched a match with me, a boxing match just recently. Britain's Tyson Fury, the Gypsy King, versus America's Deontay Wilder, the Bronze Bomber. It was the rematch, and Claire was really excited to watch it with me. Why was it a rematch? Well, the first fight was amazing. I watched that. And in the last round, the last few seconds, Deontay Wilder hit Fury with such a punch, there was no getting up. To all of us, it was like, oh my goodness, it's over. He's finished. And Wilder raises his arms in the air, does a bit of a jig. He knows the fight's his. Then all of a sudden, he just looks stunned as Fury gets to his feet. And he fights on. And he actually nearly wins. But they called the match a draw. And so, the rematch. And just before the fight started, there was an awful lot of activity on Twitter and social media. And somebody said, the reason we're all here tonight is because he got up. Tyson Fury, that is. Well, the reason I'm here today, talking to you, listening to me, the reason we are here is because Jesus got up from that grave. He conquered death. He rose again. And he claimed victory. The devil was left stunned. The authorities scrambled to raise an inquiry, establish the facts, what was going on. To this day, the undisputed champion of the world, the King of Kings, Jesus Christ, is alive and real. And he's preparing for the rematch. And when he comes again, he will establish his kingdom and his lordship, and everyone will bow to him one day. I read a verse this week from Psalm 29 verse 2, and it says this: be in awe before his majesty, be in awe before such power and might. Come worship wonderful Yahweh, arrayed in all his splendour, bowing in worship as he appears in the beauty of holiness. Give him the honour due to his name, worship him wearing the glory garments of your holy priestly calling. When Jesus entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, I'm going to suggest that some of that crowd idolised when they should have worshipped. I'm going to suggest they didn't recognise beauty worthy of praise from a place of contentment. They were in awe of the power, but not the glory. They demanded salvation from their circumstances. They called him the son of David, and if they really knew David, they would realise that he was the man that wrote that verse in Psalm 29. This was a man who feared God. Yes, he was a great warrior, but never did he go into battle without first recognising that he was totally dependent upon God. And here in the psalm he applauds God for his protection and help. And David still had problems, but he knew that God was powerful and faithful and always worthy of praise. He trusted him, and with that trust brought contentment. That verse talks about beauty. There's a lot of beauty in this world today, but it's not perfectly holy. One day, we will know what both combined look like. If we're aware of God's holiness, that should stimulate us to worship as we ponder on his perfections. That should fill us with this awe. If we worship, that transforms us, and with that we become more like what we were supposed to be. I may not comprehend fully, but I can strive to know more accurately. And as that understanding deepens, I am transformed and he is glorified, and that culminates in beautiful worship. When we consider the Lord Jesus Christ today on Palm Sunday, let's not forget who he is. Let's not forget what he's done for each one of us. He loves us. He died for us. And he rose again. And I want to leave you with these words that mean more to me right now in the kind of days that we're living in than any other time in my life. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future. And our futures are pretty uncertain at the moment. And it's scary. But because I know he holds the future, life is worth the living just because he lives. Have a great Palm Sunday. Have a lovely week as we make that journey now towards the cross. And let's not forget that we're alive and he's alive, and the reason is because he got up. And let's give thanks to God. Thank you.